There we go. Go ahead.
Good afternoon, evening to everyone. Helping Parents Heal is a nonprofit organization dedicated to assisting bereaved parents to become shining light parents by providing support and resources to aid in the healing process. We go a step beyond other groups by allowing the open discussion of spiritual experiences and evidence for the afterlife in a non-dogmatic way. Affiliate groups welcome everyone, regardless of religious or non-religious background, and allow for open dialogue. Your attendance today at the Helping Parents Heal meeting is voluntary, and we are here for the benefit of learning from and sharing with other parents whose children have passed away. It is understood that our discussions are intended to be confidential and not designed to replace traditional therapy or spiritual counseling. Helping Parents Heal offers a wide variety of speakers to allow parents to be informed about many possible ways to heal, to connect with other children, and to learn about the afterlife. The views expressed by our guests do not necessarily reflect those of Helping Parents Heal, and we ask that you take away from their presentations whatever may benefit you personally. And with that, Elizabeth's going to introduce my favorite guy, Brian.
That was wonderful. Thank you so much, Ty. You did a great job. And I am really, really honored to introduce Brian. Brian and Tywana Smith's daughter, Shayna Elayne, whose name means beautiful light, transitioned on June 24th, 2015 at 15 years of age. Shayna was a force while on earth and continues to be a force after her transition. The couple has had many visits from Shayna, including sessions with mediums where she came through loud and clear. After her passing, they began experiencing a series of synchronistic events that led them to Mark Ireland, Elizabeth Boisson, and Mark Pitstick. The unique connection of events was undeniable and helped them understand that it was their destiny to become affiliate leaders for the online group. They also, Brian is a board member as well, and he now has published a book, Grief to Growth, and we are just absolutely thrilled to have Brian here tonight. So without further ado, please welcome Brian Smith.
Hey, everybody. I think a lot of you know me, if not most of you, so I'll try to keep the bio portion of it. I'll try not to make it too boring, but I appreciate you guys having me here tonight. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Let's see. Can you guys see it now?
Yes.
All right, cool. All right, so what I want to talk about tonight is basically forming a new relationship with death. Death is something that we don't like to talk about, we don't like to think about. Of course, we're all here on this meeting today because we've all dealt with it up close and personal in a very unique way compared to what other people have gone through. So I'm going to talk about that tonight. Let's see, go ahead and advance that. All right, so this is what we're going to talk about tonight. We're going to talk about my story a little bit. And the reason I'm going to talk about my story is because I don't think it's completely unique. And I think you guys, some of you at least, will be able to resonate with some of the things that kind of got me to where I am today. We're going to talk about my inspiration, which we've already touched on, mostly is my daughter, Shana. So Shana will feature prominently in this conversation. We're going to talk about society's relationship with death. What is it that we currently think about it? What do we think as a society? We're going to talk about what grief is. Again, all of us here are up close and personal familiar with grief. We're going to talk about grief from a different perspective. What if it's the beginning of a journey? What to expect while we're grieving. We're going to talk about how we can do grief a little bit better, some tools, and then I'll summarize. So those are the things we're going to go through. This is my family. These are the people that I live for. It's really interesting, being in the situation I'm in right now. I feel like my daughter, Shana, who's there to my left, and my wife to my right, and my other daughter, Kayla, the taller one in the yellow dress. Those are the people that, as I said, I live for. Shana keeps me connected to my higher self, I would say. She keeps me striving to be higher, and Kayla and Tywana keep me grounded. They're the ones that keep me here connected to this earth. So these are the people that, as I said, I kind of live for. Now, my background, I grew up with what I would think is a traditional view of death. I grew up in the Pentecostal church and was taught about fire and brimstone, heaven and hell, a judgmental God, Death is the end of this physical existence and all those types of things. So as I said, it's a pretty traditional Pentecostal home, I guess, if you can call it traditional. But some of the things a lot of us were taught in church and Sunday school. And for me, I was a sensitive kid. So these things really impacted the way I viewed everything in the world. And I actually was terrified of death. My grandfather was the pastor of the church, so I took it very seriously. My whole family was really involved very deeply. So I grew up where death was kind of traumatic. I thought about, heaven and hell. And, when we're taught hell, I think a lot of us kind of think we don't really ponder it that deeply. I did. I thought about eternal torture and eternal separation and darkness. And I literally wished I had never been born. From the time when I was a small child, I was like, why would I take this risk and come to this planet? Or God sent me here, and if I don't get it just right, he's going to send me to hell. So this is like kind of trauma that I was going through. I was taught that the dead sleep. There's verses in the Bible that say the dead know nothing, the dead are asleep. So there would be no relationship when someone dies. There's no relationship between them and the living until the final judgment, the resurrection, when we're all resurrected, and then we see them again, hopefully, if they go to the same place that we do. So there's maybe heaven in the by and by. And again, frankly, as a kid, heaven sounded boring to me. I mean, I did not want to play a harp all day. Or there's one song that says, when we've been there 10,000 years, bright shining as the sun, we'll still be singing God's praises. I don't like to sing, and I didn't want to sing for 10,000 years. So this view of death didn't really work well for me. Now, moving broader, that's my own personal view of death. As a society, death is a stranger to us. We don't talk about death. We don't want to think about death. We push it aside. And a lot of us have never even seen anyone die. We hide it away. They're taken away to hospitals to die often, or they die in a nursing home or a different setting. Back even several years ago, when someone were to pass away, they'd bring the body to the home and they'd have a service there. But now we have funeral homes. So everything's kind of pushed away when it comes to death. We live in a very youth-oriented culture. All of us want to keep looking young. And part of that is as a denial of the fact we're getting older, which means we're getting closer to death. So you notice the ads on television are all about staying young and looking young and being young. And so we push aside the idea of the fact that these bodies that we're in are actually aging and moving us closer to what's inevitable. There's this preconceived notion that of when people should die. The thing is, again, back in the older days before we had modern medicine and we have more plentiful food, et cetera, and we've controlled diseases, children died a lot more often back in earlier days. And so families got used to the fact if you had 8 or 10 kids, you might lose 1 or 2 of them. And frankly, my grandmother lost a couple of children. So for us, when our children pass at an early age, or a spouse passes at an early age, it seems so out of order and so out of normal. We all expect to live to be 70 or 80 years old. So that's another thing that makes death in our society even harder, because we know that none of us is promised that we're going to live those long lives. And there's really not much knowledge of the afterlife. Back in the day when people took everything on faith, we said, again, heaven in the sweet by and by. But when people kind of started pushing aside faith as much and started moving towards science didn't tell us much about the afterlife. So people said, well, then there must not be anything. So if you don't have a knowledge of the afterlife, we fear what we don't know. So it's natural to have a fear of death if you don't know what death is. And if you think you are this body, it's clear. One thing that's clear is when this body stops functioning, that's it. The body stopped functioning. If you think you're the body, then you've stopped functioning. Therefore, death means the annihilation of who you are. So if you don't have a knowledge of what's going to happen to you after the body stops functioning, it again creates more fear. And we see death as the ultimate failure. The medical profession, they're taught to avoid death at all costs. Even when people are terminal, even when people are very old, they will try to delay death for as long as possible. Again, us that have lost children, we say, well, that's not right. It's out of order. I failed them, or the God failed them, or God failed me, because this should not be, because they're gone and they shouldn't be gone. And again, that comes from a lack of knowledge. Our children are not gone. They are healthy. They're healthier than they've ever been. They're happy. They're with us. But if we don't know that, we see death as the ultimate failure. So these notions of death cause a great deal of stress and fear and anxiety and all of those emotions in all of us. So for me personally, I had a dark night of the soul because of what I talked about earlier. The fear of death that I had got to the point was so bad that I was having panic attacks. And for a person that has a fear of death, and if you guys have ever had a panic attack, you'll know what I'm talking about. When you have a panic attack, you feel like you're dying. You feel like you're leaving your body, your heart races, your skin gets clammy, and you just feel like just this unreal feeling comes over you. When you have a fear of death and you're having a panic attack, it's like the worst possible thing that can happen to you. And this went on for quite a while with me, and it got to the point where it was untenable. I couldn't keep continuing on the way I was. Another triggering event for my dark night of the soul was my uncle passed away when I was in my mid-20s, and my uncle was gay, and my uncle was not accepted in the church because he was gay. And since he wasn't accepted in the church, the teaching was that my uncle was in hell. And I remember talking to my brother one night. We were talking about my uncle, and he said, "Yeah, it's too bad that that Uncle Michael's in hell." And I was just like, "What?" He said, "Well, yeah, of course. He wasn't in the church, so therefore, he's in hell." And it just really took me aback. It didn't make any sense to me that someone who I knew to be a good, loving, caring person would be in hell because the church told him he couldn't join the church. Therefore, God sent him to hell. These are the types of paradoxes or conundrums that toxic religion can set up in you. And if you're a person like I am that kind of thinks about things deeply, they'll literally drive you insane. So I needed a new way to look at things. I need a new way to look at the Bible. I need a new way to look at basically everything. So I went on a big exploration thing. I got on the internet, looked up everything I could. I studied the Bible. I studied church history. I read books about how the Bible came about, and I learned a new way to look at the Bible. And I'm glad to say that I was able to salvage a lot of what's in the Bible. There's a lot of really good stuff in the Bible. One of my ancestors is Thomas Jefferson, and one of the things he's famous for saying is that the Bible is full of diamonds and dung, which is entirely true. There's some great things in the Bible. There's some real gems in the Bible, but there's a whole lot of dung in the Bible, and you have to learn how to kind of sift through it. So what he did is he took a New Testament and literally cut out the parts that he thought didn't belong and created his own Bible that was called the Jefferson Bible. So I think we all have to, as I said, the Bible is a great book when it's looked at critically. Now, for me personally, I ended up getting into counseling. I got to the point, as I said, where I just could not take the panic attacks. I couldn't take the relationship I had with this God that was like so angry at everybody. And even if he was going to save me, what about everybody else? What about people like my uncle? I just couldn't accept that. So for me personally, because I knew my fears were rooted in my Christianity, I went to see a Christian counselor, and I got on medication. I was on medication for a few months. We had a plan to get off the medication, which I did, but I just formed a whole new relationship with my faith, and basically formed my own faith. I mean, I don't call myself a Christian anymore. I've studied Buddhism. I'm kind of Buddhist, but I jokingly say I practice Bryanism. And I encourage people to, whatever works for you, take that and make that part of your practice, your religion, your faith, whatever you want to call it. And I remember growing up, they said, religion, it can't be a cafeteria religion. You can't go and pick and choose what you want. You've got to choose one thing or the other. And I totally reject that. I say, find truth wherever you can find it, whether it's in a Buddhist text or a Hindu text or a Christian text or a Muslim text, or if it's a book that was written yesterday by Natalie Sudman. Wherever you find truth, truth is truth. And I believe that God speaks through multiple ways, whether you call it God or source or creator, whatever you want to call it. There's all kinds of ways to tap into that ultimate truth that we're all part of. So I studied not only my faith all over again, but I also started looking for evidence, because I'm an analytical person. My training is engineering. I'm like, is there any evidence? I mean, is there any proof that this stuff is real? And to my surprise, I found out there is a ton of evidence of the afterlife. And one of the first books I found was The Afterlife Experiments by Dr. Gary Schwartz. And here, 18 years or so later, I'm actually working with Dr. Schwartz on the Soul Phone project. So that's funny how that's come full circle. But, you know, things like near-death experiences, which you guys are probably all familiar with, people who have been to the other side and come back and can tell us about what they've seen. Mediumship, you know, I started talking to mediums. Gary Schwartz has actually tested mediums. Julie Beischel has tested mediums. So anybody that tells you that mediumship is a bunch of hogwash and has never been proven scientifically, it's absolutely wrong. Mediums have been studied scientifically, and it's been shown that they can get information that they couldn't get any other way. There's something called after-death communications. People have talked to people that on the other side through instrumental trance communications, through things like electronic voice phenomena. So all these things are areas where if you're really interested, and if you say, I just don't want to take it on faith, I want to know more, you can. It's all out there. And the great thing about the world we live in today with the internet and books and podcasts, you can find out as much as you want. And then physics, interestingly enough, is catching up with what faith has told us for a long time. We know things like quantum mechanics, the fact that things can be a particle and a wave at the same time, the fact that there are not 3 dimensions of space and a dimension of time, but there are like 11 dimensions. And so what are in those other dimensions? Dark matter and dark energy, which make up like 95% of our universe. So all these things are not proof of an afterlife, but they're indicators that there's something more to our universe than meets the eye. And just that, you know, I think really points to the fact that there's something else out there. So I kind of went through what my background was, my relationship with death, what I was going through up until the time that Shayna passed. And this is my daughter, Shayna Elayne. Shayna passed away June 24th, so it's going to be 5 years in 2015. Shayna was a top scholar. She was like 16th in her class of like 600. We homeschooled Shayna for 8 years before she went to public school. But she went to public school. She fit right in. She was one of the most popular kids in the school, which is really pretty wild because since she hadn't gone there up until that point. She played basketball for, I guess it was like, 7 or 8 years. She was being recruited by the high school team. She was always destined to go play in high school. But then she decided about 2 years before that, I'm going to play volleyball. And we said, Shayna, you've never touched a volleyball in your life. She said, I want to pick it up. She picked up volleyball within a couple of months. There were the high school tryouts. She made the freshman team. She said she wanted to go out for a traveling team. We said, Shayna, you just started playing volleyball a few months ago. You're probably not going to make the traveling team. She called up and said, they don't want me on the regional team. They want me on the national team. So she played on the national team for volleyball after having played for a few months. So this is how Shayna, everything in life was like this for her. She was a very adventuresome child. She just wanted to experience everything. She said, you know, I want to have a broken leg. And I would say, Shayna, don't wish for a broken leg. Why would you wish that? I want to know what it's like to be on crutches. So she just wanted to experience things. When she was about 10 years old, she was diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis. And it was a pretty serious case. So she had to go on these injections and have blood drawn she had a couple of procedures, but she took them all just like a trooper. I mean, I remember the first time she got blood drawn, she said, I wonder what it's going to feel like to get my blood drawn. I mean, that's just the way that Shayna went through life. She was a great scholar, very popular, even to this day. Shayna was 15 when she passed. There's a group of girls that call themselves the Shayna Six. And they still come by the house every angel date, every birthday. They still keep in touch with Tywana and myself. And they still talk about Shayna. When they went to college, they used Shayna for a lot of their college essays. So she made a huge, sorry about that, I hit the wrong button. She made a huge impact in her 15 years while she was here. What just happened to my presentation? There we go. Can you guys see my presentation? Can you guys see my presentation? Okay, Irene, I think is nodding yes, so I'm gonna go ahead.
Yes. Yeah, it's
sorry about that. Yeah, I hit the wrong button. So let's talk about what is grief. And you guys all know what it is, but let's just give a quick definition. I call grief a deep, prolonged mental anguish an intense sorrow, emotional suffering resulting from a loss. Now, we're all familiar with grief from a loss of a person, but grief can be the loss of a job. It can be the loss of a relationship. It can be the loss of anything. What I've observed over the last few weeks or months, we've been going through a lot of grief over the coronavirus. We're locked down. We've lost freedom. We've lost certainty. Some of us have lost jobs. We've lost money. What we're going through right now with the George Floyd situation and the protests and everything that's going around the world, that's causing people grief. So there's a lot of grief that we're all experiencing right now. But grief is not a particular emotion. It's really kind of a container for emotions. And so while we're going through grief, we can experience shock. We can just experience disbelief, rage, anger, fear, all these things, guilt. All these things can be a part of grief, and they kind of come and they go, and they come in waves. So for you that are new in grief, you might find yourself going, I'm going crazy. You know, yesterday I felt this, today I'm feeling this, and then tomorrow you're going to feel something else. And I want to tell you that's actually very normal, that people do go through all these range of emotions, and they're up and down and back and forth. Now, when grief hits, one of the analogies I like to use, and this is something I use in my business, and it's the tagline for my book, is planted, not buried. Because grief feels like the end. It feels like you've been buried. You're literally underground. You're never going to see the sun again. And my planted, not buried tagline is actually inspired by a Bible verse. As I said, I'm still into the Bible. I assure you, I must solemnly say to you, unless a grain of wheat falls into the ground and dies, it remains alone, just one grain, never more. But if it dies, it produces, and this is black in my view, but it produces much fruit and grain and yields a harvest. So the thing about the grief, the triggering event that causes your grief, it's going to feel like it's ended your life. It's going to feel like, you know, this is the worst thing that's ever happened to you. And it is. I mean, it is. I'm not going to deny the real pain that comes along with it. But it can be something that triggers you to go into the next phase of your life. And if you allow it, it can allow you to grow and to produce even more fruit than you would have if this event had not happened. So another thing I use when I'm working with the clients is like, what if this is the beginning of the journey? Because we see grief as the end. It's the end of a relationship. And the thing about when someone passes away, it is the end of that physical relationship. And there's no denying that. And that's why it feels like you're never going to get over it, because you know you're never going to bring that person back. But what if you can have a different relationship with that person? What if you can still continue the relationship while you're here? And what if you can look forward to seeing them again, and not just to believe you might see them again, but to know you're going to see them again and to actually look forward to that day. And I'm telling you it's possible to get there. So one of the things I do with people is help them understand, what do you expect when you're going through grief? Because again, if you haven't been through a traumatic grief, and there's different types of grief too. So let's talk about that for a second. If a grandparent dies, like my grandmother died when I was in my 20s, and I lived with her for 13 years. We were very close. She was like a mother to me. But my grandmother was old and she was sick. And when she died, you know, it was bad, but it didn't crush me. When Shayna died, it was a whole different story. A completely different level of feeling like it was the end of my life, like my life would never be worth living again. But when we go through grief, those first few days or even weeks, you might feel numbness. And I've had people say to me, I think there's something wrong with me. I don't feel anything. That's a normal thing that happens when you're going through this, because frankly, you've got to still function. I remember, you know, having to plan Shayna's service and going to the funeral home and picking out things and all the decisions I had to make and having to take care of people as they came into the house. So we will actually shut down our emotions for a short period of time so we can continue to function. So you might feel some numbness up front. Don't worry about that. The feelings will come back. It's just something I'm very frank about. You might have death wish or suicidal thoughts. And the reason I bring it up, because again, people think they're going crazy. They may have never had suicidal thoughts before. They may have never had a death wish. But especially during the loss of a child, as parents, we want to be with our children. And we want to know our children are okay. And we're used to being there for them. So you might have a feeling, I need to be there for her. I need to be there for him. Who's taking care of them? I'm telling you, those feelings are normal. If you start thinking about acting on them, get help. But if you start planning, you know, get help. But if you have those passing thoughts, they're completely normal. You might have a feeling of indifference. Sometimes when people go through this deep grief, you're like, nothing matters anymore. So you just don't care about anything. So you might stop taking care of yourself. You might start sleeping too much. You might start drinking more. You might start driving recklessly. These are types of things that might happen. On the other hand, you might have an intensified feeling of fear. If something happened to my one daughter, maybe something else could happen to my other daughter. And I can tell you I remember feeling that with Kayla, and we had to say, sweetie, you got to start telling us, like, when you call, first thing you need to say is, I'm okay. When we call you, you need to pick up the phone. I don't have time to tell the story, but we had one time we were going to see her, and we called her for hours on the way to see her. And she had overslept, had her phone under her pillow, was on vibrate. And we were both in the car thinking she's dead, so those feelings will go through your head. You might cling to the past. And this is something that I did. My daughter was 15 when she passed away. And the way I looked at it was, okay, every day I get farther away from being with her. Every day I'm going to lose a little bit of her. I'm going to lose that memory. I want to go back to June 23rd, 2015. So actually, as time went forward, it was actually making me feel more stressed out. What I've actually done is turn that around, and I look at it now. Every day I'm getting a day closer to seeing her. So I don't cling to the past anymore. I also know that she's with me right now. She's literally with me right now. Shayna is always over my shoulder. And I've talked to mediums that have told me that. I've walked in the room where there've been intuitive people, and they're like, who's the little girl with you? And I'm like, I guess it's Shayna. So she's always here, and she lets us know. And even just yesterday, she dropped in on us. You might have feelings of regret or guilt. Again, as parents, you're going to have these. They're very normal. People, especially with parents, we think we're omniscient, we think we're omnipotent, and we think we're omnipresent. We think we're like little gods to our children. So we should have been there. We should have stopped this from happening to them. We should have known it was going to happen. We should have saved them. Even if they were sick, we should have been able to heal it. Let all that stuff go. Grief is bad enough. When you compound grief with guilt, it makes it even worse. And I've talked to parents who have said, I talked to one person that said, I made 6 mistakes the day my daughter died. 6, she counted them. And she said, and if I hadn't done those things, she'd still be here. And I'm like, well, how are you supposed to know that those led to, I said, I guarantee you make 6, what you call mistakes every day. That just happened to be the day for her to transition. You had nothing to do with the drunk driver that killed her when she was coming home from work. You can't be everywhere all the time. But a lot of times we'll think that, and it will be harder on ourselves than would ever be on anybody else. So I'm encouraging you, as much as you can, to let go of that. Now, grief is hard work, and I'm not going to tell you any different. It does require practice to get through it, to deal with it, what I'm going to call successfully. I say it gets better, and it does get better. It gets easier to deal with. I liken it to carrying a weight. If you carried around a 25-pound weight all day, every day, when you first start carrying it around, it would be very heavy. After a while, it's going to just become routine. It's kind of the same way with grief. You're going to still carry it around, but you're going to get used to it. You can remain stuck. You can make that choice. And I've seen people make that choice. One thing about the fact you're part of Helping Parents Heal, that's part of not only our mission statement, that's part of the name. If you want to heal, that's why you're here. And if you want to heal, you can heal, but it's going to take some work. So some of the things that I found that are really helpful is having a gratitude practice. And this might seem counterintuitive. The worst thing that could ever possibly happen just happened to you. And I'm telling you to be grateful. I'm not telling you to be grateful for that, but I'm telling you, find things that you can be grateful for. And believe it or not, this will make a difference. I didn't think it at first. I've been doing it for a few years now. But every morning when I get out of bed, I think of 3 things that I'm grateful for. And they don't have to be big things. It could be, I've got a lunch appointment this afternoon, somebody I really want to see. It could be the fact that I could go for a walk that morning. It could be the fact that I can, during this coronavirus thing, the fact that I'm able to breathe, because there were a lot of people that were having trouble breathing. So find things to be grateful for. One thing about the human mind, there's this misconception that we can multitask, and the fact is we can't. We can do one thing at a time. So if you're thinking about gratitude, you can't be feeling sorry for yourself at the same time. You can switch back and forth, but you can't do both at the same time. So if you practice this gratitude practice, it actually will help replace the negative thoughts with the positive thoughts. And one thing people will tell you when you're going through grief and you want to connect with your kids, especially, which we all do, raise your vibration. And you're like, how am I supposed to raise my vibration when I'm going through the worst thing I've ever been through? This is one way to do it, is to practice gratitude. Practice forgiveness, forgiving yourself, as I kind of touched on earlier. A lot of times that's the hardest thing to do. Forgiving anybody that might have been involved in your child's passing, whether it's the doctor, the drunk driver, the person that sold them the drugs, the whatever. It's letting go. And the thing about forgiveness, it doesn't mean you're condoning the behavior. It's not something you have to do. It's not a requirement. It's not something that is easily done necessarily. It's a process. But what it is when you are holding onto a grudge, you're energetically tying yourself to another person. And you're literally energetically dragging that person around with you. When you forgive them, you're letting go of that, and you're letting go of a weight. So I encourage people to work on forgiveness, finding hope, and that's what we're talking about with the afterlife studies. You know, understanding who we are as human beings, that we are not just the meat suits or the earth suits that we wear, that your child was not just the meat suit that they wore, and that your child is there with you even now, and your child is waiting for you, and starting to look forward again as opposed to looking in the past. Finding your tribe. This is something that Ty and I talk about all the time. We were so fortunate to find Helping Parents Heal, you know, really early on through, as I said, a series of coincidences. I don't really have time to go in today, but we just happened to plan a vacation. We met Elizabeth. She talked to us about Helping Parents Heal. We became affiliate leaders here in Cincinnati, started, you know, the online group, and just continue to find people that are like-minded. You're going to find, unfortunately, sometimes when you go through this process, you're going to lose people that were part of your earlier tribe, people you thought were your great friends. You might lose some family members. They're grieving too. They may not be able to cope with the passing of your child. That's okay to let those things go, but find people that you can feel comfortable talking with. Some tools for navigating grief. Meditation, mindfulness. I think I touched on this earlier. I know a lot of people don't like the word meditation. It sounds painful. It sounds hard. It could be as simple as finding a good song to play, an inspirational song for 3 to 5 minutes. It could be, if I always tell people, if you can't meditate, you just haven't found the right technique yet. It could be listening to music. It could be going for a walk. It could be, frankly, mindfully doing the dishes, turning everything else off and just concentrating on what you're doing. This practice of looking at your thoughts and turning within will help you to slow your thoughts down, which may be racing. It'll help you to understand when you're having bad thoughts that I can choose my thoughts. So if I'm having a thought that I don't want to have and I catch myself, I can actually choose a better thought. So I encourage people, you got to find a way to practice mindfulness. Exercising physically can help because we are mind, body, and spirit. And if we let ourselves get run down, our bodies get run down, it'll actually run down our minds and our spirits as well. So again, you don't have to become a world-class athlete, whatever works for you. I like to walk. So walking actually helps me both mentally and physically. And so I walk for 7 miles every day, whatever works for you. Practicing self-care. It's really important to be gentle with yourself, especially when you're going through grief. Take naps, take extra breaks, take care of your diet, make sure you're getting enough sleep. All those things that may sound kind of routine or silly, but they'll really help, and you really need it when you're going through grief because your body is going through physical withdrawal, especially those early months or even the first year. You're going through kind of withdrawal, so you've got to really build up your strength. I talked about taking breaks, and I encourage people to study. This works for me. We have this mindset in the world of materialism that we're all surrounded with. And your friends are going to think you're crazy when you start talking about some of the things we're talking about. You've got to really reinforce this renewing of your mind. And I call it renewing of the mind. You've got to reinforce this new way of looking at things. So listen to podcasts, read books, go to conferences, all those things that can help reinforce this new mindset that you're trying to build. I want to just drill in a little bit more on finding your tribe. I've worked with clients who have, unfortunately, as I said, even family members have said, it's too painful for me. I don't want to talk about your son or your daughter. And I've had people that say I've had to turn away from my brother, sister, mother, father, aunt, uncle. So find somebody you can feel comfortable with. And it might not be the friends and family. It might be church. It might not be church. For us, we were going to a church that when Shayna passed away, we said, man, this is not it. It's too superficial for us. We left that church and went to another church where that believed more like what we were in line with believing. So we started going to a Unity church, which was very, very helpful for us. We went there for a couple of years until we got so involved with helping parents heal and the other things we're involved in that we don't need that anymore. So we found, other community. You may find that surprising people come into your life. Like I said, you're going to lose some people. That sounds horrible, but you're going to gain some people too. You're going to gain people you never dreamed that you gain. And some of the best friends that we have now are people that we've met, frankly, since Shayna transitioned. People that have become like instant friends, best friends, family. A lot of the people in Helping Parents Heal, you guys are like family to us. So these things will come along if you allow them to, if you look for them. And so be open to those things as they come along. Peer-to-peer groups, again, Helping Parents Heal is the one that I recommend, of course. And social media gets a bad rap, but there's every group under the sun on Facebook. So find a group of people that you can hang out with and you can talk with, do Zooms, do book clubs, whatever. This is just some of my own personal experience since Shayna has transitioned. I found an organization called IONS. They have local meetings around. They also have online meetings if you don't have a local meeting close to you. Our local chapter meets once a month. They allow people who are non-experiencers. This is for International Association for Near-Death Studies, for those of you who don't know. They allow people who haven't had near-death experiences to go. I go, and I get to talk to people who have had near-death experiences face-to-face. Authors come and they talk about their experiences. It's a great thing to do. Helping Parents Heal is something that I've found I've become involved with. I'm actually on the board now. I work on the Soul Phone project. I work with Mark Pitstick and Gary Schwartz on that. And that's technology we're trying to develop to allow people to talk to people on the other side. Again, I mentioned Facebook groups earlier. I'm in a group called Afterlife Topics. I'm in a group called Voice of Our Angels. There's just a couple of the groups that I'm in. So what we're trying to do is basically, as I said, we're trying to form a new relationship with death. We don't want to be afraid of death. We don't want to see death as an end. And I chose this picture from the Day of the Dead here because I think the Mexicans have it right. They honor their ancestors, as they call them, on the other side, and they know that they're still with them. And we can have this relationship with death where we just see it as a transition. My daughter, Shayna, didn't get a chance to graduate from high school. And, I could be sad about that Shayna didn't graduate from high school, didn't learn to drive a car. But Shayna graduated from life. And I'm the slow learner. I'm 59. I'm still here. She graduated early is the way I look at it. I had a reading with Suzanne Wilson about, I think 9 months after Shayna passed. And Suzanne said, I'm seeing car keys. Why am I seeing car keys? So I think Shayna's driving on the other side too. But death is a transition, but death is not only a transition, it's an illusion. And you find I rarely use the word death because it's really the death of the physical body. What we are never dies. And when our kids transitioned, most of the time they stepped out of their bodies before their body even stopped functioning. But all the time, it's a smooth, seamless transition. We're here and then we're there. We don't go to sleep. We're not asleep for 1,000 years. We're not in the grave. If your child is in a cemetery and you want to go visit that place, it's a special place to you, that's great. Your child will go along with you when you go because your child is with you where you are right now. And the grief event can be seen as an opportunity for a new beginning. Think of yourself as a seed that's been planted. Think of yourself as starting a new journey. And again, this might sound flippant or trite to people who are just starting out on this journey, and I don't mean that, because you've got to process all those emotions I talked about before. So maybe 6 months or a year in is when you get to the point where you can start saying, okay, now what do I do? How do I start to grow from this? So the first part of it, we're going to be processing, all those terrible, terrible emotions and all the shock and the denial and the guilt and all those things. And then we're going to start looking at, okay, now what do I do? And the thing about death is, because we know our bodies are not here eternally, it makes life a little bit more precious. We know that we have to cherish this day, that we have to live in the now. So I think the death of these physical bodies actually serves a purpose. So I'm going to wrap up. If you can, be prepared before the event happens. Now, you're all here because it's already happened to you, but it's going to happen to you again. It's going to happen to a spouse or a parent or another loved one. So prepare yourself as much as you can. Grief is not limited to the loss of life. As a grief guide, I work with people that have had all kinds of losses. I'm also a life coach. But if you are going through another loss and you say, this feels a lot like grief, which a lot of people were with this coronavirus thing, it triggered a lot of us because it felt a lot like when our kids passed. It is. Recognize it as grief and deal with it the same way. You're going to have those raw emotions at the start. We need to deal with those. We're going to try to develop a new perspective. We're going to use these practices, tools I talked about earlier to get through and to build our strength. We're going to build community. And we're going to look at this as I said, as a new beginning. So with that, I'm at about 55 minutes. This is me. You can find me at www.grieftogrowth.com. That's the number 2. I have written a book that's Planet Not Buried, Grief to Growth, Planet Not Buried. I know a lot of people can't read when they're in early stages of grief, so it's purposely very thin and easy to read. It's also available on audio. And I think a lot of you guys know I have a podcast as well. I've had Elizabeth on, I've had Irene on, I've had some really fantastic guests on, so you can find my podcast. And with that, I'm going to stop my screen share and see if we have any questions.
There are questions, and that was wonderful, Brian. And I thank you for telling us all that information. One of the things that people have asked, and I agree with them that this is a good question. Patty's asking, why do people say the veil is thinning? What do they mean? And I certainly have an answer for that. I'm sure you do too.
Well, everybody has a different answer on whether the veil is thinning or not. The way everything I say, remember, our collective understanding is evolving and our personal understanding is evolving. So I'm going to tell you where I am now. I think the communication with the other side is getting easier. So you could either look at it as the veil is thinning. I don't think there's a physical veil that's actually getting thinner, but I think maybe what it is people on this side are raising their vibration. And a lot of people say we're kind of at a transition point. And we were talking before we got on this, I think humanity is kind of at an inflection point. So I think we're raising our vibration. It's making it maybe easier to communicate from the other side. And we're coming out of a period. I mean, there was a time I think the veil was very thin. And as man became more materialistic and became relying on our own understanding and science, we kind of thickened the veil because we stopped looking at the other side. And I think we're coming back around to that. So that's my take on it.
That's beautiful. And I agree. I think that it's getting a lot easier with the shift that's happening in the world today for us to be able to understand all of these things that exist, that have always existed, that we just never really looked closely at before. There are questions also about your podcast. And Alicia is asking, can you talk a bit about your podcast series? Why you interview the type of people that you do? Could you kind of expand on that a little?
Yeah, I've got a very broad range of people that I interview, from shining light parents to people who have had NDEs to mediums to people that are involved in healing, like I said, like Elizabeth and Irene's sister, Judy. So every episode is really about making people understand the greater reality, to understand who we are as human beings, why we're here, and how to heal. So anybody I can find that can bring that message across, or people that are inspirational, that have been through grief or had spiritual transformative experiences. So that's what they all have in common. It's all about trying to help people to grow and to heal from wherever you happen to be.
Alicia is saying, thanks, your shows are wonderful. So she's obviously someone who gets to listen to your shows. I also wanted to ask about your communication, obviously, with Shayna. Andrea says, great information. Is there ever a time that you feel that your daughter is busy, and you need to connect with her. Ty has already answered this question, but maybe you could expand, say a little bit more about this.
Short answer is no. There's never a time when she's too busy. There's a couple of things about, and we can get really deep into what time is. But when we're on the other side, time, let's just say it's different. Some people say it doesn't exist at all. It's very, very different. So they're not constricted by time the way that we are. So no, your child's never too busy to talk to you. You're not bothering them when you communicate with them. You might have been told that, but I don't believe that's not true.
Good. Lindsay, and yes, they actually have plenty of time for us. I think that's a very good answer. There's no time that you can't connect with them. And from what I understand, they can be in many places at one time. So they can be spending time with us, and they can be spending time with their grandparents, and they can be spending time with their siblings as well. Lindsay is saying, forgiveness is a hard one. Maybe you could talk a little bit more about forgiveness.
Forgiveness is a hard one. And it was interesting. I was on a call with my family this Sunday. We had a Zoom call and we were talking about forgiveness, and one of my cousins was struggling with it. I don't mean to be flippant about forgiveness, and I don't want to make it a requirement. It's not a requirement. But forgiveness, if you think about it as being for yourself more than for the person that you're forgiving, maybe that'll make it a little bit easier. The thing is, when you're carrying around that grudge, a lot of times they don't even know it. You're angry and you think you're putting the anger on them, and they don't even know it. But you're energetically connecting yourself to that person. So what I say to you is if you start to look at it was, I want to forgive this person because I want to let go of this, then that might make it a little bit easier.
That's beautiful. And I have, let's see, Carol is asking about the Soul Phone project, and she wants to know how it's going and says it's very exciting.
Yeah, the Soul Phone is going well. We've shown that we can communicate with people on the other side. It's I don't want to get too deep into it, but it's a binary thing right now. It's like yes, no answer. So think of it like it's yes, no. It's binary. We're working on a electronic version that probably will be available in maybe I think a year or so. So it's coming along. There's a misnomer, and it's actually maybe the fault, maybe bad naming, that there's going to be a device, like this, that's going to be called the Soul Phone. I don't know if that'll actually exist or not. I don't know if it'll be an app. We don't know exactly what it's going to be. But right now, think of it as just a way that if we bring someone in from the other side, we can say, are you this person? Yes or no. Did you die this way? Yes or no. So they can answer yes or no questions. And we're at that point now. It's not commercial yet, but it's going well.
That's wonderful. So Brian and Ty, I got to meet you here in Phoenix early on in your journey. And Sangeeta is asking when you started talking to your daughter. I guess I'm wondering myself, had you already started understanding and realizing that Shayna was communicating with you and that she was with you when we met, which was amazing, and it was certainly serendipitous, or when exactly was that?
That's a great question, because I don't communicate with Shayna the way some people do with their kids. I have some people in here I know someone on here that actually has seen their son since he transitioned. Some people, they hear their kids audibly and stuff like that. It's not like that with me and Shayna. It's more like she's in my thought. She's in my mind. She sends signs, all kinds of signs. When shortly after she transitioned, I said, I want one of our signs to be dimes. So I'll find dimes at just the time that I need it. And yes, I'll give you one story. It was, we were on vacation. It was the first vacation we'd taken since she had transitioned. I was out with Ty and Kayla. I got up early in the morning to go for a walk, and I was feeling really, really bad. And I said, Shayna, I need you to, help me get through today. You need to send me a sign. And we go to get in the van to take us to the ferry to go across to the island. And I decided to bend down and get in the back seat instead of getting in the seat where Ty and Kayla were. And as I bent down, underneath the seat was a single dime. And I just saw the dime there. So it's the timing of stuff like that. Yesterday, I've been doing a series of videos on this whole thing that's going on with George Floyd, et cetera. And I've been getting a lot of grief for it. So yesterday, Ty goes, I just found this document on my OneDrive. I don't know what it's from Shayna. And it was something Shayna had written on Emmett Till and Trayvon Martin. We don't even know when she wrote it. We didn't know it existed. But it came up on the OneDrive yesterday, and we found it just the time I needed some encouragement. And I recorded a short video on it. And when I recorded the video, I looked at the timestamp. It was 11:11. So we get those kinds of things from Shayna. And Shayna drops in on mediums. She drops in on Suzanne Giesman all the time. I don't know why. She just really likes Suzanne. So she'll call Suzanne will call us up and say, Shayna dropped in, and were you doing this? And Ty's like, yeah, I was doing that yesterday.
That's wonderful. Well, Anna is asking, and I think this is definitely something that I can identify with. She felt a warmth in her entire body a couple of months ago, a couple of months when her son had transitioned, and she's asking if that's a sign. I've not felt it again. It was a wonderful warmth. And Ty has answered it. Would you like to answer?
Well, this is what I'll say to you about signs. If you feel like it was a sign, it was a sign. And not to and discourage anyone from ever asking any question, but don't ask somebody else if it was a sign. If you feel like it was a sign, if it made you think of your loved one, and this is whether you find a feather, if it's a song that came up on your phone, then yes, then it was a sign from your loved one, because you got that feeling, that feather, that whatever, and you thought of them. So it was a sign.
That's beautiful. And I just have to say, I don't know, Anna, I'm sure you're aware, I get hugs from my son all the time. And it's exactly like that. That's exactly, actually, I kind of described it in the beginning as drinking a glass of red wine. It just makes you feel warm all over, and just, that's exactly, just calms you down. And Morgan never let me cry because he kept giving me these hugs, which was amazing. So anyway, this is a question from Lindsay, and I would like to just see if you can answer it. One loss is that she feels she's lost intimacy with her husband. Is this normal, and what can she do? Is this something you could answer for us?
Yeah, it does happen. We all grieve differently. And as I said earlier, and I don't know what stage she's in or stuff like that, but our bodies go through changes when we're going through grief. I mean, physically, we go through like a physical withdrawal, especially when there's a loss of someone that's lived with us. So yeah, it can definitely happen. Unfortunately, on the grief path, we all do things differently. Some people want to talk about it. Some people don't want to talk about it. So it's something that you just have to kind of work on together, and be as open and honest with each other as you can. But I would say it's not unheard of, for sure.
Well, I feel really grateful to have both of you on here tonight, because you both are about at the same stage of the way that you're evolving because of the passing of Shayna. And I was going to ask if maybe Ty would like to say something. Would you like to maybe just say a little bit about what's happened on your own path, and add to what Brian has said? And I guess I need to unmute you. Okay, there you are.
Yeah, I came from a little bit different background from Brian. I was born and raised Catholic. But still, I just wasn't, I didn't really feel like I was totally Catholic. I went a lot on Sundays just to, check the boxes or whatever. Never had any interest in the afterlife or anything like that. I had done no reading, no meditating, just, I think I was one of those people that believed when our loved ones are gone, that they're gone. And my father transitioned, I guess, about 5 years before Shayna. But he was 77. He had gotten to the late stages of dementia. And, when he was gone, I was really sad, but I had been saying goodbye to him along the way. So I just didn't give it a lot of thought. And when Shayna passed, I mean, as we all, I'm sure, felt this way, it just turned my world upside down. And I just had to question everything that I had ever believed in. And I had to know, where is she? Is she really gone? Will I see her again? So it immediately just sent me into a path of reading and studying. And one of the first books that I had 3 books I felt like really helped me along. And one was Suzanne Giesman's Messages of Hope, and then George Anderson in the Garden of Souls, I think is what it's called. And then Tom Zuba, A New Way to Do, or what's his book called?
New Way to Do Grief, I believe.
New Way to Do Grief, yeah.
Permission.
I'm trying to.
Permission to mourn.
Permission to Mourn.
Permission
Yes,
to
I'm
Mourn.
sorry.
That's what it was. Permission to Mourn.
Oh goodness. Yeah. Sorry.
So those 3 books just really helped me. But I really feel like had Shayna not have passed, I would still be sleeping. And I feel like part of her transitioning, part of our family plan, our soul pack, if you want, was that this would wake me up for instance. And so it's helped me not to be afraid of death. I was always afraid of death also. I never wanted to talk about it, but I feel like now I could handle anything, because I feel like the worst thing has happened to me. And I'm still a work in progress. I still have to reach back into my toolbox from time to time to pull out things to help me get through, a few bad hours or whatever. But I want to say that it is not the same feeling that it was in the very beginning, that those raw stages. I really have progressed forward from there, and I never thought that was possible, because prior to Shayna passing, I didn't think I would live a day without losing one of our girls. And I feel like I'm definitely living, and I'm definitely finding joy again. I miss Shayna, of course, like crazy, but I know she's right here, and she always shows up when we need her. So I just encourage everyone to just, be gentle with yourselves. And there's no time frame or no time limit, but our kids are with us. I know that. I believe that to my very core.
That's beautiful. Thank you, Ty. And I agree with you. They are still right here. And it's wonderful. I remember meeting you both at that breakfast place, and just thinking that you were in a really good place in spite of what had happened. I think maybe Brian was a little bit farther ahead than you were on the path at the time. Mm-hmm. But it really is wonderful to know that all of us understand that obviously Shayna's here tonight, as well as all of our kids, and they're all best friends. And that's the thing that I love the most, is that they are always together. They're working together to teach each other how to communicate with us. And again, I say this all the time, they high-five each other whenever we smile. So they feel so proud of the fact that they were able to get us to smile. And so they're not gone. That's the most important message that we can hear. And that's the reason that we do heal, because they are with us and they help us to move forward. But thank you for that. And Brian, do you have any closing messages that you could tell? Everybody's saying thank you. Ty in the chat box, everyone was saying thank you. Brian, beforehand, do you have anything that you'd like to say in closing, Brian?
No, not really. I just wanted to kind of emphasize, obviously everybody's part of Helping Parents Heal, so I don't need to plug that. I think you guys have found a great place. This group has definitely totally changed my life. I'd say saved my life. If anybody wants to reach out to me, you can reach out to me through my website, which is grieftogrowth.com. Happy to talk to you, and check out the podcast.
Wonderful. Everybody's saying thank you. And obviously what we always do when we close is we ask everyone to unmute their microphones and say thank you and goodbye. And I'm just so happy that everyone was here tonight. Again, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube, where this video will be tomorrow. We'll have that up on the YouTube tomorrow. And thank you. I hope that you and Ty are reading the chat boxes. This goes by, but let's go ahead and unmute. And thank you all for being here.
Thank you, Ty. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you, Brian.
Thank you,
Ty. Thank you, Elizabeth.
Good night. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you,
Good night,
Elizabeth.
everybody.
Thank you, Brian.
Thank you, Anna.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Mavis
Brian and
Patilla
Ty.
is speaking on Friday, but
Oh
it's
yes,
Friday
thank you,
afternoon on the
Irene.
East Coast.
Irene, here you are.
Yes,
Oh,
please
Irene,
be.
you're there.
Irene is here too. So yes, please
you.
don't forget to come join us for Mavis Patilla. But it's going to be early. It's because she's in the UK. So make sure that you get on early, and we'll see you then.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Good night, everybody.
Thank you, Brian. Great
Thanks,
meeting.
Brian. Thanks, Ty.